Welcome to our channel, Listen to My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
This is Tina, and this is a story about me and my biological mother. My mother is sitting in the cafe of a garden center, staring at her cup of tea. I'm over the other side of the shop looking at some strawberry preserves. I want to attract her attention, but the word mom sticks in my throat. I use it so infrequently. Instead of calling out, I just walk over and show her the jam. Ever since I left home 15 years ago, the relationship between my mother and me has worsened. In hindsight, it was never very good to start with, but it's taken 15 years of counseling and soul searching to realize that. The fact of it is that my mother and I don't like each other much. We don't hate each other, we're just sort of indifferent. There, I've said it, indifferent. Saying it feels like committing some sort of crime. My mother and I live hundreds of miles apart, and in the case of most of my friends, this should mean that visiting home should be a time of joy and excitement. Instead, they are weekends of tense, polite conversation, both of us desperately searching for something in common to talk about. And that is usually what she's currently watching on television. As a 20-something woman, I'm constantly surrounded by reminders that my mom should be my best friend. Advertising aimed at my demographic features glamorous, youthful mothers going to the salons with their best friend daughters. Because it's all so alien to me, I tend to become a little bit fixated. I tend to look beyond the principal plot lines of films and become obsessed with the parts that involve a mother and a daughter for a large, loving family headed by a quirky matriarch. When the film Mamma Mia came out, I went to see it with a girlfriend for a bit of a laugh. It was mainly about love affairs between Meryl Streep and her exes. As I watched, I was as always bewildered by the apparently natural bond that mothers and daughters have on screen. Another film. It's complicated, again with Meryl Streep, has a plot that hinges on her post-divorce relationship with her ex-husband. But the highlights for me, the way her children clustered around her and the way she reacted when they all came back to visit. Though I know it's not just on screen. My friend Susie has the same exact sort of relationship with her mom. It baffles and fascinates me. They talk every single day, sometimes more often, and tell each other everything. I didn't have an unhappy upbringing. I wasn't a happy child, but that wasn't down to child abuse or neglect. I was well clothed, fed, and I even had ballet lessons. I went to university paid for by my parents, and I knew and I still know that there's always somewhere to stay if I need to. But my mother and I never had the sort of closeness I saw in my friends' relationships. They would go shopping or share secrets. They would tell their moms things about their lives. The one time I tried to ask my mother about her teenage years, she told me to mind my own business. And so I did. I grew up minding my own business, and she minded hers. I left home as soon as possible and met my now husband at university, and he quickly stepped into the role of best friend and emotional support giver. I made enduring friendships, most of which I believe to be unconditional. Most of my friends believe me to be a loving and caring individual, and I know I could turn to any one of them in an emergency, and them to me. Yet, I cannot remember the last time my mother and I hugged, even though I hug my friends all the time, and the very thought of it makes me cringe. My mother is the last person I go to in a crisis. She is certainly the last person to whom I would tell a secret or a problem. And if I'm honest, I don't need to anymore, as I have my own friends now. But my lack of a close friendship with her bothers other people a lot. When I say that I don't have a close relationship with her, they ask whether we fight a lot. But no, I don't recall ever having a fight with my mother. That would entail caring enough to bother. I used to go through phases of worrying about it and trying to repair the damage, but all the while I was aware that I was doing it for other people. I visit infrequently, but I visit. I do it not so I can see her, but if I'm honest, so her neighbors and family can see me visiting. A few years ago, before I realized I didn't care anymore, I called her up and asked whether we could sort it out. Her answer told me everything I needed to know. Sort what out? I stopped bothering from that moment on. Now my principal concern is explaining to people why I don't see her that often. And I feel guilty for not really having a good enough reason. My parents weren't divorced. My father died a few years ago. There has been no huge family dispute. There's no big skeleton in anyone's cupboard. Well, not mine anyway. I recently went to see a nurse for a routine appointment, and she asked a host of questions about my mother. Eventually, I had to confess that I didn't know half the answers. She asked whether I could find out. My heart sank as I imagined having to give away a detail of my life, such as why I was going to the nurse to my own mother. Mother's Day is a nightmare. Trying to find a card that doesn't say my mother is my best friend or the best mother in the world or my heroine is not easy, let me tell you. Others try to fix it for me. Why don't you book a spa weekend for your mom? The very thought of my mother agreeing to or enjoying something like that is just laughable. Or they ask, why don't you go for counseling? This would be all well and good if she would ever condone the idea, but it implies a relationship that needs to be mended. Why does it need to be fixed at all? Were my mother a woman I had met on a train and chatted to for half an hour, she would be one of the last people in the world I would want to talk to for a further half hour. If she wasn't my mother, she would be someone I groaned about having to spend any time with. I simply grew up and discovered that I didn't like my mother as a human being. She's not like me. She's self-obsessed, not interested in others, thoughtless, and incapable of genuine warmth. She has no concept of giving love to receive love, and has never asked me a single meaningful question about my life or career. Some people might feel that I have a duty as a daughter to be there for my mother, that it's down to me to repair our relationship. But because of the way she's raised me, I don't feel there is a relationship to repair. I wish my mother no harm, and if she were in trouble, I would help her like a shot. But I would also be there for any of my neighbors and the old man who swears at people from the bus stop across the road.
We lived with a monster who knew no mercy. He would hit and insult us all the time. I wished him dead on a daily basis. He would kick me out of the house often. But as we all know, there comes a turning point in everyone's life that either ends in success or tragedy. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Lara. I am the middle sister among 4 siblings. We lived with a cruel father, whose bad behavior had long erased any kind memories we may have once had for him. Our mother was kind, lovely, and responsible. She used to take care of us in every way, but she finally had to abandon us because she just couldn't take any more of father's abuse. I remember the scene vividly to this very day. There was a big fight between my parents. At the end of it, mother had opened the door while holding a suitcase. We were too young to understand anything at the time. She was crying as she turned and walked out of our lives forever. We were expecting father's attitude to change after that, but it didn't. He continued mistreating and ridiculing us every opportunity he got, neglecting us completely. He gave us neither food nor clothes, only a very small amount of money to fend for ourselves. What could we do? We had to live with the situation. He would often return home drunk at midnight. Scared, we'd stay quiet in our rooms. The only bright spot in our lives was our dear brother Philip. He was father's favorite son, which caused us to depend on Philip to get anything we need, like money or other necessities. Philip was so funny. He could make us and even father laugh. He had a way with father and could usually manipulate him to protect us a little. We all loved Philip. He was the only sunshine in our miserable, gloomy existence. One day, we woke up in the middle of a stormy weather. We turned on the TV and listened to the news. It said the bad weather had spawned a huge tornado, It was heading our way. They advised people to stay inside. We all looked at each other, knowing full well that our old worn-out roof could not withstand a tornado. Philip said he needed to talk to Father. After he knocked and entered Father's room, we heard Father shouting at Philip. Philip had a look of fear on his face. Father then shouted, "If anyone wants to fix anything at home, then he is welcome to, but I will not fix anything." Philip gasped and said, "But Dad, it's a big tornado." Father then grabbed Philip by the collar and pulled him up close, saying, "Then you go fix it." Philip was so afraid he couldn't swallow. Father dragged Philip to the backyard. He brought nails, wood, a hammer, and a long ladder. Philip was terrified when Father pushed these things at him and told him to get to work. Philip begged, "Please, Dad," but Father just shouted, "Go." Philip took the nails, the hammer, and the wood and began to climb the ladder up to the roof. The wind was howling, blowing very hard, and I had a feeling of dread that something terrible was about to happen. Father just stood there, not worried about Philip's safety at all. To calm us down, Philip looked at us, as if to say, "Don't worry, everyone. I'll be okay." There were many wires on the roof. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind caused Philip to lose his balance, and he reached out to grab onto something to keep from falling. Unfortunately, he got hold of an uninsulated wire. He screamed at once and fell off the roof. We watched, horrified, and began screaming. Father frantically rushed over to Philip's body lying on the ground. He lifted Philip's head into his arms and rocked him gently, but Philip was dead. He got electrocuted. We had never seen Father cry, but he cried a lot that day. At Philip's funeral, we all stood and looked at the photo, showing Philip smiling like an angel. Father hugged us as a group and said, "Please forgive me, kids. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that I loved you all so much. I'm so sorry for not being a good father." We believed him. We hugged him back. He was being sincere with us for once. From that point on, he was a changed man. He gave us everything. Love, attention, money. Now we love our home and our lives. I can finally say truthfully, with all my heart, I love you, Daddy.